Hi everyone, morning. It's Promise Oderaon again. So today I want to speak to an issue that's been bothering me and have led me into doing some research, and that's the history of Nigeria. One of the biggest problems that Nigeria is facing, especially the youth of Nigeria, is our history, and it's affecting our unity because people have different stories, people read different books, and there is a lot of discrepancies in the history, depending on who you are listening to or which book you are reading. You probably think um, you probably get some parts of the history wrong, or there will be some gaps in your understanding of what really happened. So even amongst Igbos or amongst the Yorubas or Hausas, depending on the writer, there is always nuances, bias, and different sort of record of what exactly happened. Now I've read Chinua Achebe's book. There was once a country, which was written from a foreign sort of minister kind of view. So he was representing Biafra, traveling abroad to speak to nations. I've also read Alex Maduebo's book, The Nigerian Revolution and the Biafra State, which also was written from the military side of things because he was the general commanding officer for Biafra. But before then, he was actually the army armory officer general, something like that. So he was actually high placed in the north. And he wrote extensively on the actual war fought by Biafra. So those are the two perspectives. But then this last book that that I'm reading, which I think is the most comprehensive history book, is In Biafra, Africa Died by I think Emefiena Ezeani or something like that. I've forgotten the name actually. But I'm going to do a live tonight. In that live, I'm going to treat the some aspects of the book, maybe the beginning of the book, and I will encourage everybody to sort of go and read that book. It's sort of um, it's like the best history work done by a Nigerian because it referenced a lot of other books, a lot of other works done by other Nigerians, other books written by the main actors from the north, the Yorubas, the Igbos, and then he drew down some answers from all the literature on the history of Nigeria. Now, this is my take. As a student of history, this is not my own personal opinion. You see, somebody told me, and I really believe that everybody has a history. Sorry, everybody has an interest, right? Now, sometimes people can have personal interests, and those personal interests can be seen to be tribal interest. Also, some people can also have interest for tribes, so people can fight for their tribe, or people can fight for their country, and sometimes people can fight for their own personal ego, their own personal gains, their own selfish gains. And most of the times, people fight based on their own conviction. I believe this is the reason this person is doing this. Sometimes, maybe not what that person is saying, but you're thinking, oh, what he's saying is not actually what he meant. So there is all these nuances. I just want to just put that out there to lay a foundation to my thought process. Now, since you understood that everybody have an interest, yeah, there are stakeholders in Nigeria, which is the Hausas, or they always say the Hausa Fulani, the Yorubas, the Igbos. Um, I also mentioned the TVs, and then other parts of the Biafrans, which is the Ogojas, the Jaws, and the rest. But also there is also a stakeholder which is quite mentioned and important to mention, and that's the British. And the reason I mentioned the British is that the 1957 oil exploration, or they found oil and started drilling oil in Nigeria in 1957, right after they discovered oil. So that's another interest. Now, bearing in mind all these interests, yeah, some of these people that I just mentioned have their leaders in government, right? Now, let's now go back to the genesis, because if you want to understand Nigeria, you have to start from the top. Now, the word Nigeria, some people start reading the history from when Nigeria started. You need to go back even before Nigeria started to actually understand. Now, there are maps of the world, prior to the existence of Nigeria, which you have the Bight of Biafra, you have the Bight of Benin. In the Bight of Biafra, it even extended even into Cameroon. If you remember, there was a time Obasanjo gave Bakassi Peninsula to the Cameroon after Nigeria had an issue with Cameroon fighting for that piece of land. So, but let's go back now to what we now know as Biafra and Benin was together with the West, what was called Nigeria, because Nigeria, the name Nigeria by Flora Shaw, supposedly came from River Niger, which is, of course, River Niger goes all the way from Benue and all of that to the east and all of that. But then, and some parts as well went to, so it goes to Lokoja and the rest. And so it was the west and the south, or the southeast, with the south, all that place was where it was called Nigeria. But then for administrative purposes, from 1914 to 1960, that was, sorry, not 19, sorry, in 1914 rather, it was amalgamated by Frederick Lord Lugard, who was then the British Army General. That he was looking over the whole place for the British Empire, because those days what you have was empires. So now, the place called Nigeria, then the name was retained when the north was joined together with the south, so it was now maintained as one administrative entity called Nigeria. Now, that understood, yeah. Nigeria existed from 1914, when the southern and the northern protectorates were joined together, till 1960, when Nnamdi Azikiwe helped Nigeria to get independence. Now, when the British left, although they made Nnamdi Azikiwe the ceremonial prime minister, the actual, the ceremonial president, the actual prime minister was Tafawa Belewa, right? He's the one that was in charge of the whole Nigeria. But then you have like three regions, and these three regions were the northern region based in Kaduna, the western region based in Lagos, and the eastern region based in Enugu. Now, it was civilian rule, so the British left and handed over to the civil rule. Now, Tafawa Balewa was, and the funny thing is, when they were leaving, the Western wanted to have their own region, headed by Awolowo. The East wanted to have their own region, headed by Michael Okpara. But the North said they don't really want to have their own, region. In fact, it was as if they wanted actually to not be part of Nigeria. Even Awolowo at some point didn't want to be part of Nigeria. So the issue of division even started while the whole Nigerian concept was starting, or the independence was being discussed. Just like the Indians and the Pakistanis decided to have at independence a different country. The same was Nigeria, but unfortunately it didn't fly through, because Azikiwe, which was the person that succeeded in getting Nigeria independence, wanted Nigeria to remain one indivisible entity. Okay, so long and short of the story, the British saw that the Northerners are very humble people. They are not as, I think the word they used for the Igbos was pride, and the word they used for the Yorubas was I can't remember what the word they used for the Yorubas, and I don't want to upset anybody. And then they called the Northerners humble people. But the most important thing was that, where did the issue of Nigeria start from? The issue of Nigeria started from after Tafawa Belewa became the prime minister. Nigeria had these three regions. In the west, the Yoruba land, now the north had a party called NPC, Northern People's Congress. The west had Action Group, and the east, being nationalist, Azikiwe had Nigeria's NCNC, something like that. Now, it's something to do that the full meaning was Nigeria. I'm going to read the whole book. I will read the whole chapter and do a live later today to explain that book. And if you can get your hand on it, the name of the book is In Biafra, Africa Died. Now, while they had all those parties, Awolowo was the premier of the Western region. Then he wanted to go for the federal, which was Tafawa Belewa, right? So Tafawa Belewa was the premier of the Northern region. After some time, they said, okay, they want to also have their own region. but then he was the premier of the whole Nigeria. Now, it is worth mentioning as well that all the military installations in Nigeria were all in the north, Kaduna, Zaria, mostly Kaduna, Kano, Zaria. Then they had one in Lagos and then had one in Enugu, right? So by that construct already, there is disadvantage in terms of the not having, because the British favored them for being humble or whatever. Now in the West, Awolowo had a deputy called Ladoke Akintola. Now this Ladoke Akintola, when Awolowo wanted to go to the federal to go and vie for office of Tafawa Belewa's office, Akintola now wanted to become the head, and that is where the problem of Nigeria started. That is the genesis of Nigeria's problem. That issue in Lagos with the Western region is the genesis. In fact, according to the book by Ifajuna actually was the real originator of the coup plot. Not even Kaduna and Zogo, but it was Kaduna and Zogo that announced it on radio. But he was part of it. Then Major Adeboyega also, these three people have written books and said that the reason why they actually planted that coup of 15 January 1966 was because of the problems in the Yoruba land, and also there's also the TV riots, and also they also alluded to the corruption in the federal government, or also in the whole government, whereby there was corruption, there was elections were rigged and stuff like that. So this was what led these 5 Igbo names and one Yoruba name to plan the coup. But what is also worth mentioning is that amongst the rank and file that went actually to execute that coup were also the Northerners, the Yorubas, the other minority ethnic group. So one started asking the question, okay, why is it then titled an Igbo coup? Out of all the tribes that carried out this thing, why did they now single out the Igbo coup? Is it because there is more Igbos in it? Now, if you understand coup plotting, it is not tribalistic. People will plan coup because they want to oust a government, and after that particular coup, there were so many other coups in Nigeria which nobody calls the tribe of the person that carried out the coup to say it is their own what do you call it, tribes coup. So for example, Gideon Okat carried out a coup that was nullified, or that was that failed against Babangida at the time by Abacha. It wasn't called a TV coup. Both Gowon, Obasanjo, Babangida, Buhari, all these people carried coups out in Nigeria. They were not tagged either Yoruba or South. So why was this particular coup by Ifaj, Kaduna Zogo, and Adeboyega and all the others, why was it tagged an Igbo coup? So that's why you need to read the book to understand. Now I understand why, and I'm going to try and explain it. This video is just to sort of give you a little overview of what actually happened. So this problem between Akintola and Awolowo, now that was the Action Congress, now gave birth to Akintola opening his own party called UPP. I think it's United People's Party, don't quote me. So now these people continued fighting to the point that in their regional House of Assembly, they were fighting with maize and destruction and all of this. That's what led the military to start thinking, okay, we need to step in and we need to take power from these civilians. They are corrupt and they could not. And also the blame was on Tafawa Belewa that he couldn't manage the affairs and he was just running a reactionary regime. So if the issue that was to be resolved was between the North, which was Tafawa Belewa, who was an enemy to Awolowo, and also it was him that even imprisoned Awolowo, right? So, and there is also believed by some quarters or some writers that it was Ojukwu that freed Awolowo, because originally Ojukwu and Awolowo were also meant to secede together, because Awolowo said if the East secede, we are going to follow suit, we are going to secede as well. But why it is important to understand this history is so that people will stop looking at Igbos as evil people or enemies of state, or the reason why Nigeria is where it is today. So an Igbo man was also killed in the coup, and also a Yoruba man was part of the coup. So why are we exempting some parts of the Yoruba land and also, singling out the Igbos? I will see you later today. Thank you.